Hey everyone, welcome back to Duffy's Box, your go-to channel for exploring the mysterious and the unexplained. Today's topic is a subject that has fascinated and terrified people for centuries: witches. From ancient myths to historical figures and even famous films, witches have a rich and complex history. Let's unlock the secrets of witches together. So, where did the idea of witches come from? The concept of witches dates back to ancient times, with roots in various cultures and religions. In ancient Greece, they had their own sorceresses like Medea, known for her magical abilities and tragic story, often depicted as a priestess of the goddess Hecate, from whom she learned her magical abilities. One of the most famous figures in Greek mythology and plays is Circe, a powerful sorceress and enchantress who appears in Homer's Odyssey, could transform men into animals. Talk about a bad first date, huh? These early depictions often combined beauty with danger, blending elements of fear and fascination. The Romans had their own witches, Strigae and Magi, feared for their malevolent magic. Strigae were believed to be shapeshifters and child stealers, terrorizing the night, while Magi were sorceresses skilled in casting spells, brewing potions, and summoning spirits. These figures weren't just myth, they were so feared that Romans passed laws against witchcraft and relied on charms and rituals for protection. Roman literature immortalized these witches, with characters like Seneca's Medea and Horace's Canidia showcasing their dark powers. In everyday life, Romans took no chances, using anything they could to avoid the wrath of a witch having a bad day. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church's attitude toward witches evolved from a skeptical witches aren't real stance to suddenly seeing them as the devil's new recruits, especially during the High Middle Ages. By the Late Middle Ages, this shift escalated into widespread witch hunts and executions, with the Malleus Maleficarum providing the handy instruction manual, published in 1487. This book, written by Heinrich Kramer, a German clergyman and inquisitor, was essentially a guide for identifying, interrogating, and executing witches. Despite initial skepticism, Kramer's work became a key reference for witch hunters. Because, who needs a guide to catch real criminals when you can just hunt witches instead? How useful. The Church's involvement in these persecutions marked a dark period where fear and superstition backed by divine guidance led to some truly horrific outcomes for those unlucky enough to be accused. Let's talk about medicine. Many women accused of witchcraft were actually healers and midwives, using herbs and plants to treat illnesses. Their knowledge of herbal medicine often made them targets. For instance, during the witch hunts in Europe, women who practiced folk medicine were often accused of witchcraft because their skills were misunderstood or feared. Apparently, curing someone with herbs was more suspicious than bleeding them with leeches. These women, who we might call herbalists today, used plants like belladonna, mandrake, and hemlock for their medicinal properties. Their knowledge of these powerful plants led to suspicion and accusations of witchcraft, especially in times of plague or social upheaval when people were desperate for someone to blame. Why solve your problems when you can simply hang or burn someone at the stake? Now let's talk about some of the most famous witches in history. One of the earliest and most well-known is Joan of Arc. She was a French peasant girl who, claiming divine guidance, led the French army to several important victories during the 100 Years' War. Although she's often remembered as a saint and a martyr, Joan of Arc was accused of witchcraft and heresy by her enemies. She was burned at the stake in 1431, but later canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. Talk about a posthumous promotion. Then there are the infamous Salem witch trials of 1692. In the small village of Salem, Massachusetts, hysteria and fear of witchcraft led to the accusation, trial, and sadly the execution of 20 innocent people. Because nothing says we're a rational society like accusing your neighbors of witchcraft because your cows got sick. Another fascinating figure is Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII. Anne was accused of witchcraft, among other charges, which led to her execution in 1536. Some believed she had bewitched the king to marry her, as if Henry VIII needed witchcraft to make questionable marital decisions, right? Let's take a look at some other famous witches from around the world. In Ireland, we have Alice Keitler, a wealthy woman accused of witchcraft in 1324. She fled the country, but her maid was burned at the stake in her place. And they say money can't buy you anything. In Sweden, there's the legend of Malin Matsdotter, executed in 1676 during the Torsaker witch trials. And in Russia, the famous witch Baba Yaga appears in folklore as a fearsome figure who flies in a mortar and pestle and lives in a hut on chicken legs. She is often depicted as a guardian of the forest and an ambiguous figure who can either help or hinder those who encounter her. But witchcraft didn't end with the historical witch hunts. In the modern world, witchcraft has taken on new meanings and forms. Today, many cool people identify as witches as part of their spiritual practice. Modern witchcraft, or Wicca, emerged in the mid-20th century, founded by Gerald Gardner. Wicca emphasizes nature worship, the celebration of seasonal festivals, and the practice of magic for positive purposes. Finally, a version of witchcraft that won't get you burned at the stake. Modern witches often gather in covens, celebrate Sabbats like Samhain and Beltane, and follow the Wiccan Rede, which states, "And it harm none, do what ye will." This new wave of witchcraft is about empowerment, connection to nature, and personal growth, far removed from the dark stereotypes of the past. So where did the image of the witch with a long nose, pointed hat, and broom come from? These iconic features have evolved over centuries. The pointed hat may have originated from medieval alewife hats, worn by women who brewed beer and were sometimes accused of witchcraft. Apparently, a woman who could brew a good ale was terrifying. The long nose, often depicted with warts, is likely a caricature meant to depict witches as ugly and evil. Because, beauty standards were just as harsh back then. As for the broomstick, it has roots in ancient fertility rites and shamanistic practices, where brooms symbolized female power and domestic life. Imagine, a broom once a symbol of female power, now just a tool to avoid doing house chores. Witches have also made their mark in pop culture, often inspired by these real historical events. Movies like The Crucible, based on Arthur Miller's play, dramatize the Salem witch trials, while films like The Other Boleyn Girl touch on Anne Boleyn's life and death, highly recommended by the way. These stories continue to captivate audiences, blending history with a touch of the supernatural. Some other notable films about witches include The Witch, a chilling depiction of a Puritan family dealing with witchcraft in the 1600s, and one of my favorites, Hocus Pocus, a fun and whimsical take on witches in modern-day Salem. Each of these movies offers a different perspective on the age-old tales of witches. So, there you have it, a journey through the history and stories of witches. From real-life historical figures to their portrayals in films, witches remain an enduring part of our cultural imagination. If you learned and enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so I can make money. Until next time, keep your mind open and your heart curious. This is Duffy's Box. Bye-bye.